Hey guys, this is Eric Weingarten with Weingarten Racing. It's Saturday, but it's late Saturday, at least in the evening. Usually I do update videos on Saturdays about what's going on, which this one will be, but don't turn off just yet. I didn't put out any other videos this week because I just simply didn't have time, so I'm going to try to shove them all here. So what's going to be in this video is I'm going to show you a cool timing trick you can do with your engine that gets you a little bit more power out of it. I'm not going to make it like, oh my gosh, it changed my engine's whole dynamics. It will make more power, but it's not going to be like 100 horsepower gain unless you're really off. But I want to show you that just because that was learned on the LS engine. Although I shouldn't say learned on the LS engine, I already did it on other engines before, but I did it on the LS engine just to see what would happen, and I'm going to share that with you. So I'm going to do that a little bit too. And then I'm going to throw in this too, just a little bit of nugget that just came up. A little carb test that was done this week on the dyno. I had Gary do one for me just to kind of test because it's about that 1050 Dominator. Remember when I said you put that Dominator and it works on just about everything? Well, there's two exceptions now. Well, really just one exception where it made less power. But several of you said, well, that's great. You're putting on a 650 horsepower engine. What happens when you put on an engine that only makes 450 horsepower? I've got that result for you now too. So that's going to be in this video. Also, updates. So there's a sale on this head. So I'm going to talk about this head, and it's on sale. It's a good deal. And then what is this? Is this an LS head? This is not on sale. This one's I ported for a customer, but he said, can you put it on the dyno mule? And we're going to talk about that because I do have a dyno appointment coming up on Thursday. So sign up to be a channel member because you can get the updates on this one because we're going to talk about that in just a second in this video too. So first thing I want to get to though is talking about this little timing trick for you guys. So let's just go ahead and start with that, and then we can roll on the other stuff. Okay, here's the cool timing trick, and I'm going to show you this on the laptop, but I'm going to try to explain it first. So, and I'm going to make some generalities just to make this video go a little bit smoother, I hope anyway. This timing trick I show you can only be used if you have some way to program your ignition timing. So if you're trying to use springs and weights in your distributor, it ain't going to work. You have to have something like a digital box to be able to do it that controls timing. So for instance, when I'm showing you this stuff on the timing curves, this was a similar thing that we used on the MSD 6LS box whenever I was doing dyno testing the LS 408. However, I'm showing you the program that I used on my S10, which is from the MSD 6AL2 programmable box. The same thing can be used if you have a Holley Sniper as well. It's really anything that can electronically control your timing. You can do this and it will work, or should. So, but let's kind of talk about why this works. People think if you run more timing, it's supposed to be a good thing. It's not. Ideally, you'd run the least amount of timing as possible in general. But here's something else to think about too. When the engine's at its least efficient, it needs the most amount of timing. When it's at the most efficient time it can be, it needs the least amount of timing. And you're like, I don't understand. Because an engine, pretty much it's a pump, really. It's sucking in air and stuff. There are times where the ports and the cam and the valve train all work together best at a certain RPM. And during that part, it's the most efficient. Typically, that when it's most efficient is when peak torque occurs. And then there are times otherwise where it's less efficient. Say at idle, it's not very efficient. You might say, yeah, it is. Not really, because there's not a lot of energy coming from anything. So the piston speed's kind of slow, so there's not a lot of vacuum coming in there. There's also just not a lot of heat transfer because there's not a lot of heat in the combustion itself. So it's not pulling during overlap as hard. So there's just not a lot of things at idle. So it's least efficient there, I'd say. Also, as you start getting higher in the RPMs, well past peak torque, your efficiency starts to drop off. Now you're like, what's this got to do with timing? I'm going to show you in a second, kind of give you an idea. But the biggest thing to this is, this should give you an idea what you should kind of do with your timing curve. When the engine's most efficient at peak torque, you should have less timing. When it's the engine's least efficient, you should have more timing. And that will help you make more power. So in other words, whenever I'm doing most of the dyno pulls on the small block Chevy, it was 36 degrees straight across, just because it made the test very easy. And every time we made a change, the timing was always 36 degrees. Didn't matter if we started at 3,000 RPMs and went to 7,500 RPMs, it was 36 degrees. On the LS, we did 29 degrees straight across, except for one last pull because I wanted to try what I'd use. Because I actually discovered this thing whenever we were doing testing for Engine Masters. So enough with the lecture. Let me get a dyno sheet and I'll show you what I'm talking about and then how I adjust it. And you can actually see it ran how I did it on the dyno. So let me grab the camera. I'll show you a dyno sheet, show you what I mean by the timing curves and how to adjust it. And then you'll see and we'll go on. All right, this is a dyno sheet from the LS engine, the dyno mill that just got done. And if you watched the previous video, it only made 570, so you might be saying, how in the world did you get to 627, right? What did you do to get there? Well, we'll talk about that later, what was changed on it. But this is still with the enforcer head, so watch a future video and you can see how that power changed and what we did. But I only need these numbers really, and it kind of helps me out. So here's what I mean. When I'm looking on this sheet right here, what I'm trying to look at is where does peak torque occur? So forgetting the horsepower for right now, where's peak torque occurring? And if we look at my sheet here, this makes 557.6 foot-pounds of torque, and it's doing it at 5,500 RPM. So that's where it's most efficient, is at 5,500 RPM. But if you look, it's really efficient also at 54 because it's only 1 foot-pound down, and 52, 51, 52. So really, it doesn't really drop from 57 to 548 till there. So really, I'd say from 49 to about 57, it's really in its efficiency range. If I had the air hat on here, you could see where the volumetric efficiency would show it too. It would show it's very efficient between, like I said, 4,900 and 5,700 RPM. So you're like, what do you mean? If you remember this pull right here that you're seeing, it had 29 degrees of timing through the entire curve. So when I started at 3,800, all the way at 6,800 RPM, 29 degrees. Here's what I did, and here's your trick. From this torque point here, so at 50 or 4,900 RPM, all the way to 5,700 RPM, I removed timing. I didn't take out, I didn't add timing, I removed it. So before it was 29 degrees, right at 4,800 RPMs, I dropped out 2 degrees and dropped it down to 27 degrees. And then right at 5,800, I added 1 more back in and then 2 more at 5,900 RPM. So in other words, the timing curve went from 29, 27, 27, 28, 29. Okay? So why did I remove that? Because it's the most efficient. It needed the least amount of timing. That right there gained 3 foot-pounds of torque doing just that. So not only that, the gain in torque doesn't seem that much, but it really doesn't. So you're like, peak torque, it really only gained 3 foot-pounds of torque. But one thing you have to think of is it's also far easier on the engine. Because if you're running that straight timing, it looked like, well, you only gained 3 foot-pounds of torque, but it was also easier on the engine having less timing on it because it's not trying to fight against the timing during the stroke. So it's better on the engine and it made more torque. The other thing I did, now this is where I get a little tricky, at 6,300, I know it's starting to get less efficient. Obviously, the torque's really dropping down because look, 63, 521, it's dropping by 10s, right? So at 6,300 RPM, all the way to 68, I added 1 degree of timing. So what I did instead of having just 29 from that point on, at 63, I jumped up to 30 and ran 30 all the way. So the timing curve will look 29, 27, 28, 29, 30, on. That itself gained 5 horsepower at peak because it wasn't very efficient there, and that helped it. So that sounds like, well, you're just talking. Can you kind of show me what you're even talking about? Because you're losing me. So let me just pull up this program real quick, and I'll kind of show you a graph so you can get an idea, a line thing for you. Okay, sorry about that. I had to use my hands. This is the timing curve that kind of shows you, and this is what I was describing. And this is from the S10, so it's not quite the same, but I will kind of show you the live action for what the LS one was doing. Now, this is a little bit weird here because you're like, what did you do? First off, this is the 6AL2 programmable block, so it acts like a retard. So this sounds stupid. So it sounds like you're only having 8 degrees of timing. No, that's actually you're retarding 8 degrees or retarding 10 degrees. It's weird, which is weird because the MSD 6LS, this would tell you your timing. So if you said 30 degrees, it would just be 30 degrees, 29 degrees. This is you actually, if you're using this box, it's 6AL2 programmable, you have to know some math and know that you're retarding out. So if you set your timing, say at 40, and you have it at retarding, say 6 degrees, really you're at 34 degrees there, not 40. But on an LS box, because it has the crank trigger and the cam sensor, it can tell you exactly what your timing is, so it's like you just enter it in. For instance, also, if you have the MSD grid, it works the same way as the LS one where it says just the timing. Because what you do is you tell it, hey, this is 40 degrees, and you're like, oh, it's 40 degrees, great. Then instead of you doing the math, it'll just tell you what the degrees here is, and that's what your timing is. I know I kind of went through that kind of quick. This I didn't describe, but here's a little timing trick for you. If you're targeting a specific, and then this one's a little backwards the way I did it, but if you're timing a specific RPM that you want your engine to idle at, say 1,000, say right here, right? And you're usually run, say 30 degrees just because it makes sense. And you usually have to run 30 degrees at peak power, right? If you want it to idle at 35, you might put it, or sorry, at 1,000 RPMs, you might put the timing at 35 degrees. Remember, it's not efficient there anyway, but it will make the engine more efficient to have it that much timing there. But below the 1,000, you would ramp it up to like 40. And you're like, why would you do that? Because if the engine, if you want it to idle at 1,000 and the engine feels like it keeps trying to die because you got a nasty cam, right? As the RPMs drops, the timing goes up, which makes the engine speed up to get back to 1,000 where it drops the timing. So it keeps doing this. This is the reverse of what it should be. In other words, the line should have been sloped up this way. You still want to take it out so you can not kick against the starter for the first 200 RPMs. But back to what I was trying to show you. This is that curve for the torque. So in the S10's engine is a little bit different, the 355, not the one that's in there now. Its curve was different. So its peak torque occurred like at 60, I think it's 6,000. So if you could tell, this is where it was the least efficient. So I removed timing. And that's why we have that curve. That actually brought the torque up, like I said, a few foot-pounds of torque. And then I didn't do it here, but on the LS engine, peak power on this S10 occurs at 7,500. But at 7,000, I actually ramped in 1 more degree of timing and left it all the way. So that's kind of how it looks. You could tell it's sloped up. So we're most efficient here, so I'm taking out timing, getting less efficient, so I add timing and then leave it in. You can play with this on the dyno and take some time, but you're like, I don't understand still any of this. Do you have any way? I don't get it. See this right here? If the engine was hooked up and running right now, you would see these gauges and see what this is. Lucky for you, I took a video of this to show you exactly what it is. So what I just described, I recorded this as we're making a dyno pull, and you'll see, and it'll tell you actually how many degrees of timing we even have, and you can see what's happening. By the way, I should point out too, on the idle on the LS, I actually set it like at 15 degrees all the way to like, I think 2,000 or something RPM. So if you're like, you're at 18 degrees, you lied. No, I didn't really care about the idle. So from idle to 2,000, I think I had it 18 just to be easy on the starter. But once it got after it, you see it went right from 29, 27, 29, 30. And you'll see it happen. But anyway, watch this. You'll see what I'm talking about. It does work. I'll show you a graph in some other video because I forgot to print it out. It will be in the new LS book that's available on my website. Look on the description of this video. There'll be a link so you can buy that book online. But here, watch this. By the way, if you have the Holly Sniper software, such as I have here, this is also from the S10 currently. The numbers are all looking weird because they've got blue in colors with them. I don't know how to get rid of that, but you could do the same thing. So if you find out where your engine, typically when you go wide open throttle, you're like at, ½ an inch negative to 1 inch negative. You can adjust this. Now I'm in boost, so I'm not necessarily in boost, but I like to not do, I'm being way more conservative when I'm trying to tell you because I've got a supercharger on this, so I'm not playing with it like I would do with NA. But you could just do the same thing. You just do it here in your graph. You'd simply take out the timing at peak torque and keep it on. You might say, well, why don't you do it with boost? You probably should, because the engine doesn't change its peak efficiency because it's under boost. Where it was most efficient NA is still where it was most efficient with boost. The boost just kind of hides it because then it's a combination thing. Where the blower is most efficient is where the peak torque then occurs, not where the engine was. The engine still is underneath the most stress at peak torque. So you would still remove torque there, or timing there, especially if you have boost. I have so little anyway. If you look, I'm 30 degrees. And if we dyno this engine NA, this is the 406 that's in the in the S10 right now, it probably went 35. So I'm way under it anyway. just because I'm trying to be conservative. So, and you can kind of tell what I've kind of done here. This is a really, really conservative one. I think this is like the first pull. This was not the last pull, in case you watch those chassis dyno videos. I know it is, because this was like really, really soft. Yeah, that's super soft and not even correct. That's not what I ran the last one. But anyway, there you go. Now on to the other stuff. Now to the little Dominator thing. If you remember right, and I don't have the spacer here because Dunsworth used it so we could do some testing. I had said, I've put a Dominator on everything, and that's like Frank's Red Hot sauce. You just put on everything, it seems like it makes power. And people commented, rightly so, hey, you're putting on these engines that make some serious beans. And that's the reason why it's actually making more power. If you put on something that made less horsepower, say 450 horsepower, probably wouldn't do as well. Well, I asked Dunsworth Gary Dunsworth at Dunsworth Machine, hey, could you do me a favor? The next time you have a 450 horsepower engine or so run across the dyno, can you ask the customer it's okay? And I'll leave you the spacer, and I got my Dominator there. Can you test and see what it would do? He said, sure, I'll give it a shot. So what he did is he had the circle track engine, which is like they're just very popular in most of the country. I think this is a factory stock engine. Don't quote me on that. It could be something else. But they have the spec heads that they have to run. They've got a flat tappet camshaft. So for all those LS guys that think you can't make 450 horsepower in a small block Chevy, they're doing it with flat tappet camshaft, cast iron heads too. And these are not all nice heads. And a cast iron intake, by the way. Well, actually, I think this was that Performer EPS, if I remember right. It's the 2101, so it's like it's the base, pretty much. Anyway, he put a Dominator on, and this is the results it got.
So here are the dyno results. The 1050 Dominator did make more power, but it also lost a lot of torque down low. So on a 450 horsepower engine, little 355, kind of interesting results.
To the next thing. Right now, I'm having a sale on these heads because, well, I got to tell you about them first. So there are 3 sets of heads, and someone else has said, hey, can you just do a valve job on these? Because they made a mistake from the factory and they need to have their valve job redone. And then could you flow them and see if they're worth anything? I said, okay, sure. And then he's like, and I said, you know, I might be able to sell them. So here I am. I'm making a sale on these. Right now they look bare. But here, let me tell you about what this head is and what the price is, because this actually is a pretty good deal. These are made in the same place that Pro Maxes are. The design is very similar. However, these are CNC ported, as you can tell, full CNC ported. They are 340 cc's on the intake. I don't have a clue what the exhaust is. The chamber comes in at 123 cc's. I redid the valve job. So the valve job will seal because I redid it. 2300 intake valve, 188 exhaust valve. The price I'm going to tell you is assembled with AFR valves. So the valves that they're using AFR heads. The springs are good to 800 lift for a solid roller. Steel retainer though. Can do a titanium, just will cost you a little bit more. And the springs that are used will be a Howard spring, and they're good up to like an 800 lift. So for all that assembled, CNC head, $2,700. But what do they flow? They flow this. Not bad. 390 at 700. 392 actually at 1 inch, but not bad. 394 on the short runner. Exhaust flowed, 286. This is not bad for a 340 cc port. But with a full CNC ported head, quality valves in it, quality valve springs, $2,700. It's got a deal. I've only got 3 sets, so once they are gone, they are gone. But not a bad deal. Really great deal. So if you want them, hit me up. WeingartnerRacing@gmail.com. That's my email. And once they're gone, they're gone. But yeah, got 3 sets to get rid of. Pretty nice. They look really, really good. And I'm not saying they can't be improved further. So if you were someone that wanted to go on a really bigger engine, I still could cut these out to 350. It would cost you more money, obviously. But they could flow more. But yeah, it's really nice. They'll seal up. Quality valve job done. It's looking good. Now to the next thing. Because I love my viewers and my customers, I appreciate you so much. This is happening. This is a set of 243 LS heads. These are the LS6 heads. Obviously, these are the Cathedral ones. But what this customer did is said, hey, can you port these for me? And I was like, yeah, sure. And then he said, hey, do you want to try them on your dyno? And I thought, You know, I actually do, because I've got that LS48 dyno mule. And so far, I've dyno tested the stock 823 heads and the stock LS3 Enforcer heads from AFR. So one of the questions that got brought up was like, well, I wonder how much better those are than a ported cathedral port head. And I actually ported these. And he said, yeah. And he gave me the rockers to try to use for this, because obviously it takes different rockers than the LS3s. So on Thursday, I'm going to try switching this over. We got a Victor Jr. intake that fits this as well. So Victor Jr. that was on the LS3, Victor Jr. is going to be on this one. And we're going to see. I still have to re-CC these chambers because I want to make sure I got all my specs right. So whenever the book comes out, please purchase the book. Link will be in the description. Because once I've tested all 5 sets of cylinder heads, and this won't be the only one that gets tested probably on Thursday, I'm going to release results in a book, and you can buy that. You can also buy the individual results. So after I get done doing each dyno session, I say, hey, do you want to get just these texted to you? And it's a much cheaper cost. But this is going to be dyno tested. What do they flow, you ask? Well, here's what they flowed. Now, I ported these. These are 202 valves, 1550 if I remember right on the exhaust valve. 246 at 4. It does 306 at 650. It actually peaks at 313 at 1 inch. But like, that doesn't matter. It does. Exhaust goes 235, which is really good. And you're like, well, wait a minute. There are several people that got ones that flow way more than that. Oh, okay, then I did on my Superflow bench too if I want to feel good about myself. On the Superflow, it goes 252 at 4, 305 at 650, and 301 at 600, and 319. So if I want to feel good about myself, I'll put on that bench. But regardless, these are my benches, and I trust their numbers, especially that one's. This is not as good as the LS3 as far as flow, the stock flow. It's just not, even ported. No sense in lying about it. But much smaller valve at a 202. And I think this is 1550 if I remember right what I did on that. But anyway, much smaller valves. The chamber will be smaller too, which will boost up the compression ratio, because that's an interesting thought. These things probably flow about 10 CFM less than what the LS3 does. Maybe not at peak. The exhaust is really close, almost identical. Well, actually, I think these are better. But anyway, the one thing though is I think these chambers are about 10 cc smaller. I'm going to CC them and find out, which means, which I've done tests before about compression gaining more than flow. These could actually make more power because of the compression. Be interesting. I'm only going to test one cam on them. The other head I'm going to test is the small bore LS3 heads. I'm going to try to put those on at this right after. So I'm going to dyno test these, take it off, put on the ProMax small bore LS3 heads, and dyno test that one. And I'll probably wrap up the testing for that day. Anyway, that's hopefully coming up. This wraps up any technical part of this video. So after this, it's just me rambling about my son and his swimming, because the reason why I've been busy is because he's had a high school state swim meet, or shouldn't say high school, a club state swim meet, the state one, the big one for the long course. And that's been Friday, today, and tomorrow. So I'm fixing to go to bed after I get done with this video, because I got to get up the crack of dawn so he can do it again for the next 3 events. So I'm going to talk about that, but as far as technical stuff, that wraps up that. Anyway, so don't complain if you hear me talking about my son right now. All right, here's where the swim dad part comes out. If you have a kid that's in athletics, you know this is probably one of the harder things you go through. Because I think, especially when I'm thinking about my son here, I don't think he knows that when he struggles, we struggle. Because we're trying to do whatever we can to help them. And sometimes we just don't have an answer. We don't know why things don't work out. Or sometimes why they did work out when it shouldn't have. So here, this meet that he is in case you're wondering, because you follow my son, you're going to understand all the swim stuff. They have a short course that happens during the majority of the year, but during the summer, it's called long course. Long course is what the Olympics swim. That's a longer pool. There's less turns that they have to make. Turns make you faster because you could push off of a wall. So long course, typically you're slower. He gained a lot of muscle mass. He's been working really hard. The problem with that is it makes him slow in the water. So it's one of those things where he worked harder and got slower. And it's been a real struggle for him, and a struggle for me too, because I feel so bad for him. And let me try to explain it better. One of the things I've always instilled into my son, and even when I was a teacher and I did this to my students, is you don't have to have the most talent to be the best. You just don't. Many people don't even are the best and don't have the most talent, aren't even close. It's if you put in more effort, those are the ones that typically going to succeed. And that's been kind of just like a motto for life. If you want to do well, you got to put in the effort. It's just the way it is. And if you outwork someone, typically you beat them. So then my son Bishop follows this exactly. I never have to tell him to go to practice. He does it on his own. I don't have to tell him to work hard at practice. He just does. And there have been times where I'm like, can you just skip so we can make things easier? He's like, I'm not missing practice. And I mean by easier, I'm like, we're going out of town. Like when we went to the international trip, I was like, can you please skip this one so we don't get there super late at night? And he's like, nope, go on. So, which I was like, all right, I'll respect your decision. That's fine. But man, he doesn't at all. So here he is. You've got a kid that doesn't miss practice, tries his hardest at every one, and works his hardest, and it does the reverse of what I've been telling him. Like, he gets slower. So he's been getting really frustrated. So for like the last 3 meets, he's working out harder and going slower. And it's just been rough. It's been really, really rough. Because the other thing about it, too, is if you look at his progression, he had been on a straight slope up. Every time he would do a meet, he would be faster. Because he worked harder, he'd go faster. Worked harder, go faster. Now he worked harder and the same or worse. Same or worse. He wasn't really coming up. But this was all to prepare him for this weekend, which was the long course championship. It marks the end of the long course. This is the big one, right? It's state. So yesterday, which would be Friday, he swam 2 events in, and one of them was the 100, which is a freestyle, 100 freestyle. I was tickled to death because the fastest he had gone was a 101, and he did it in June, 1 minute, 1 second. And after that, he had done a 102, 103, like he was just getting worse. I don't know. He comes out yesterday. I couldn't be proud of him. He does a 59.29. So not only did he go beat what he did, because he'd been sucking for 3 meets, all of a sudden a 59.29, fastest he'd ever gone, and not by a little, by a lot, and broke the minute mark. Fast. So I was way to go. The second event that he was in was the mile. That's a long race, and it's at the very end. He used to be an excellent distance swimmer. Like, you could just smooth in the water. Distance was more of his thing. He sucked. He added like 5 seconds on. He did like a 19:45. The younger kids on the team were beating him. It was bad. But I wasn't so heartbroken about it because he even said, I'm not a distance swimmer anymore. I'm a mid-distance swimmer, which means like 500, 400, 200. Okay, you with me? Because it comes into the day. So I'm happy because I'm like, oh, thank God, finally he dropped some time. Because you can talk about 3 meets where he keeps adding times or not improving. And he's feeling the psychological warfare. And I'm not trying to say anything, but I'm like, I feel your pain completely. Because you see him going, now he's working out even harder each time, and he's just going slower. You know what I'm saying? Well, today, Saturday, this morning, he got up and he had to do the 200, which used to be his baby. 200 freestyle. And the fastest he'd gone, his qualifying time was like a 2:19, which I was like, that's slow. We know he's been faster because that's one of the ones during the summer he did improve on. Well, he went a 2:17 like a month ago at Clayton, Missouri. Not great, but at least it was faster than he'd gone. Today, he does a 2:12. So he dropped 5 seconds, and I was like, yes, thank God you did it, man. You're knocking it off, right? You're just doing so much better because that's finally a huge drop, right? And I'm like, he should be happy. He was not happy. He has a rival, all right, and it's on his team. And the kid's good as gold. It's not like they hate each other. Don't think it that way. But they swim together, and they're very fast. And that other kid went a 2:10 something. But the other kid's also younger. And he's also he is the fastest currently. That makes him the fastest in his age range in the state of Oklahoma. He is fast. He is taller than Bishop, even though he's much younger, and he's just fast. And they get along great. Both of them get along great. But he was hoping to be with him. And which I was like, stop comparing yourself to other people, all right? Stop.
that doesn't matter what you drop time, but to him it wasn't as important. And he still was don't get it wrong, he was super happy that the other kid went that fast. Like, he was cheering for him the whole time he did it. But he went after him, and he was hoping he would be about the same time. And he was he was still 2 seconds slower than what that guy was, but he had dropped 5 seconds. And that's a problem. What do they say? That envy is the thief of happiness, and that's what was happening. But then after that, he had the 100 butterfly. And he had been really picking up on the butterfly and getting a lot better. The thing was, the turnaround was too quick because he just got out of doing the 200, and he was gassed at the end. I really do think he probably would have done a 211 because he was fast all the way until just about 20 yards shy, and you could see his tank was empty, and his stroke count started getting slower, like he was just gassed. But then right after that, I think he had maybe a 10-minute rest, and he had to do a 100 butterfly, and he just didn't do well. Which he wasn't too heartbroken about that. Just, he's okay at butterfly, but it's not his thing. Tomorrow is the one he wants to do well. And as I'm recording this, I am nervous as shit. Because the one that's tomorrow that he really cares about is the 400 freestyle. Last year, he went a 447 doing it, and he made the finals. And that's the first and only, well, it's not the only, it's the first finals in club state he's ever made. And, yeah, that was last year. I am nervous to death that he won't even be able to do that. Because earlier all this year, well, all this long course season, he's been 5 minutes plus, which he hasn't done that in more than a year. So I am nervous as all get out that it's not going to go well, and he will feel like crap, and he will end the long course season with that on his mind. So as I'm telling you this, I am a religious man, and I don't know that God cares how fast Bishop goes swimming, but if you could say a prayer, it would mean a lot to me for him to go faster, to beat the 447. He should be able to, I think. I don't know. He's got to do a 50 too. The other one, I'm not worried about the 50. You know why I'm not worried about the 50? The fastest he's gone in a 50 was a 28:41. And he had not beaten it all season, right? Not at all. And the 50 is a sprint. He's not beaten it all. Like, he'd do a 29, and then he'd do a 28:7, 28:41. You know why I'm not worried? Because in the 100, he went his first split was a 28:11. And he was pacing. His first split on the 200, I think, was pretty close to what his best was, too. So I think he's probably going to break that one. It's the 400, which he really cares about. That 447 last year was amazing. I hope he has it. It's more of the endurance thing. He just put on so much muscle, and it really hurts his endurance. So that's the other thing. Just to give you an idea how much stress this is, besides all the stuff in the shop, I've been trying to find a nutritionist because I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing about getting him the right food that he needs to do this. That's the outside of my wheelhouse. Good luck finding someone that's not a quack, right? Especially like, I've got a competitive high school swimmer, not a power lifter, which that's not a big deal. No, he doesn't play tennis. No, he doesn't have diabetes. No, he's not trying to lose weight. He's just trying to have the right stamina and right foods in a certain amount of time. Good luck. Most of them, I think, are quacks, which here's what I mean. They're like, they want to do a Zoom call with you. Then I'm like, if you don't have an office and you can't meet him and measure his body mass index and tell me what he needs to do or whatever, I don't want to hear from you because it don't sound like you've got any legitimate thing to me. So that's been a real battle even trying to find that. And yeah, we're in Oklahoma, which makes it worse. But then I was thinking, you know how many probably sports medicine people graduate out of OSU and OU, not Ohio State, Oklahoma State. Surely there's got to be someone. Good luck finding them. If you got one, send me the thing because it's frustrating. Then I'm also like, what else can I do to help him out? Anything. I saw this thing about pull-ups help him. So I was like, I'm going to give him a pull-up bar. I don't know. Say a prayer. Say a prayer. I get up early in the morning for that. He took an ice bath today because he's like, Dad, they say it's going to help. So I had to go get 10 bags of ice. The water was like 51 degrees, so I'm checking with my infrared thermometer. I'm swirling around with my hand like, this is cold. This is going to suck for you. And he did it. God, I hope he does okay tomorrow. This is going to give me an ulcer. I swear to God. Because I just don't want him to end the season feeling bad. And then have to, because in a month, or actually in 2 months, a month, he starts his high school swim again, the short course one. So, yeah, I'm a little nervous. Longer video because of this, but you need an update. So, yeah, there you go. Long one. If you complain about my son's talk, sorry, bud. I warned you. Guys, remember, I don't pour cast iron heads. I am definitely no Superman. Say a prayer if you're religious. Just don't curse them. Just, if you have a kid, you know what I'm talking about. But anyway, you guys take care.